Welcome to Commander Central episode 255, and today we're going to take a look at what we think are the 12 most interesting cards from Strixhaven. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
How is it going this afternoon, my friends?
Feels like we live in Washington or something. It's been raining every single day.
There is a very Pacific Northwest vibe going on this week for sure.
Yeah, where's my vampire from Twilight who's supposed to come sweep me off my feet and all that, you know?
All Chris wants is a little bit of romance.
You know, it was like 80 3 days ago, so I don't know why we're complaining.
Yeah.
And
I keep having to maintain perspective that the fact that this is we often still have snow on the ground this time of year.
I would like to say, you guys, great job on that deck tech last week.
Thanks a lot.
I would also like to say, going forward for the rest of the show, you guys can read the cards in the notes since Chris doesn't want to hear me talk. So I'm just done, and I'll be back at the end to say my name.
Throwing a little shade. It's like CCO, except for it's inter-show. We're talking trash among our own members versus talking trash to Canada this time.
Well, yeah, it's hard because we don't see each other, you know, because all the stupid crap going on in the world. So this is the only time we get to what's up? Get some.
Well, hopefully that's nearing an end. I got my second shot this morning. Max is due for his this afternoon.
I get mine next week.
Nice. So yeah, I am hoping I will be able to start playing on Tuesdays at the shop in the fairly near future. Next couple of weeks is kind of my goal. So I am looking forward to that, getting back out there. So yeah. Speaking of, getting out there and playing, has anyone played any fun games the last week or so?
Negative.
Yes, I did the other night. Now I think about it.
What'd you play?
I played Commander with both the shop owners.
Okay.
And Phil, he created a Nicol Bolas deck. It has all the Nicol Bolases in it. It's pretty much just Nicol Bolas dragons is what it is. It's pretty stupid. Pretty powerful, but pretty stupid. And then we're playing against his fiancée Savannah, and she's playing her Atraxa deck that we tuned stupid good.
Okay.
And she played Atraxa, and Phil goes, counterspell, and she looks at him, and she's like, I'm going to punch you. And then she's like, so then the rest of the game, all she did was just glare at him. And he's like, I don't want to play this card anymore.
Well, I had a fun one on stream the other night. The game ran almost 2 hours, but it was one of those games where everyone always kind of had an answer. And we hit a stalemate point at one part where there was a Karn, the Great Creator, out. And that's the Karn with the passive ability where you can't use activated abilities on artifacts.
Yep, and then you search up Walking Ballista and win the game. Oh, wait, we're not playing Modern.
Yeah. Well, so the Karn was out, and the next player in line, who would have been Joey, had dropped a Treasure Cruise, or excuse me, a Dockside Extortionist, and then blinked it a couple times. So he was able to make 20-some treasure tokens, but couldn't actively use them as long as the Karn was there. And this was a Feather the Redeem deck, and it's filled with all of those 1-drop white and red instant spells that let you draw a card. So the amount of cards he had drawn off Feather was absurd. And if he had access to that 20 mana, he was just going to kill everybody. So it turned into a game where we spent 8 turns keeping him from killing the Karn or the Karn player just so he couldn't use all those treasure tokens. And Chase, who had the Karn out at one point, she dropped a Blightsteel and was able to swing at him, trying to kill him, and he killed the Blightsteel. But she was able to use the minus ability on Karn, which lets you bring an artifact back from exile. So she was able to bring the Blightsteel back to her hand, recast it, and the rest of us were able to protect it long enough for her to kill Joey playing Feather before he could get rid of the Karn to use all his treasure tokens. So the same Blightsteel got reused twice, and that was what finally was able to kill him. And then I was able to kill the other 2 players with a Tempsis, if you have 6 cards of different CMCs in hand. So I was able to polish the other 2 off with a Tempsis, but it was just a ridiculous game.
That seems pretty sweet. I love it when games come down to that where you're like, we got to protect the one player because they're saving all of us.
Right. Yeah, the one card of the 20,000 that would have saved that situation was essentially Karn. Karn kept him from using all the treasure tokens, and she happened to have Karn and happened to have it in hand and happened to play it the turn before he did all the dumb Dockside stuff just accidentally. So it was just a fluke too.
Yeah, because the Karn fits her deck, apparently, from what you're saying. So, I mean, it's not like it's just randomly in there to hose over other people.
So yeah, that was a fun game to be part of.
Yeah, I mean, I tuned in and I saw the beginning of the game. I stuck around for like the first 20 minutes, had to go do something, came back an hour later, still the same game, watched for another 40 minutes. I had to leave. And then I find out the next morning, Dana's like, yep, I won that game an hour later. I'm like, what?
And sometimes you get those long, like 2-hour slog games, and it's just kind of like a gridlock, and like no one can make a move. This wasn't that. It was just back and forth plays and stuff on the stack, and it was super fun for a game that lasted 2 hours. So, well, if anyone out there in listener land would like to reach out to us and talk about some crazy games they've played lately, how'd you go about doing that, Chris?
You can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central, and you can also find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
You can also head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central. Check out our reward tiers, such as the Decks You Play series. Guesting on the show are joining our community and playing some VEDH with everybody. This week, we want to say hello and thank you to 2 new patrons, Jake Kantonen and Esper Storm. And besides that, we also want to announce that we're coming back with a new drawing for our Patreon supporters for the month of April. So as long as you support us on Patreon or begin to support us on Patreon through the month of April, you will all be entered in to win the deck I played on the Scrap Trawlers stream, my Draena Callistra of Bloodchief deck. It's all sleeved up, ready to go. It's a nice budget vampire deck that I actually won a game with. So we will be announcing the winner of that in early May.
Very nice. Okay, so we're going to wind up doing 2 back-to-back shows here talking about sets that are coming out, because we got the Strixhaven cards that are all officially obviously spoiled now, and like as we're recording this, Loading Ready Run is about to do the Witherbloom preview, which is the last show and of the last of the 5 commander decks. So we're going to talk about the stuff we liked from Strixhaven this week, and then next week we'll cover those 5 commander decks, because it would just be crazy to try to do all of them at once. And we're going to continue to do what we've kind of been doing the last couple of sets, where we're just going to specifically pick a handful of cards that we like or that we find interesting and talk about those, versus like trying to shotgun 50 cards from an entire set too. If you want to go hear a crazy thorough study and preview and review of all the cards in a set, the Legendary Creature podcast does a fantastic review show. I know we've said it before, but check them out. They do like a 2 or 3 hour show oftentimes, and they have individual patrons of the show do actual card reviews, so they can like workshop it out to 30 people versus having 2 people try to spend 40 hours just breaking out every single card. So if you want a super thorough one, I would recommend checking out their show. What we've kind of found is, unless you want to do that, at this point in time, everyone's already covered the set, and we don't have that much interesting to add about 50 cards trying to do it in 30 seconds. So we did spend a little bit more time talking about ones that jumped out at us as being kind of interesting. So first up, Max, why don't you start off? What card do you want to talk about here?
Okay, so I'm gonna put a big disclaimer on this week's show and probably next week's show. Strixhaven is not doing it for me at all.
Okay.
So this was actually really hard to find 4 cards that I like, let alone would probably run myself, that weren't already in the notes from Dana, and I haven't seen Chris's selection yet. But I will start my picks off with Introduction to Annihilation. This is a 5-mana colorless sorcery that says exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. This gives me a lot of Scour from Existence vibes, even though that's an instant for a couple more mana, and it hits anything. But just another way for colorless EDH decks to be able to exile something seems really good for the format.
Yeah, so this is one of the lesson cards. So like in a standard environment, you can go retrieve this from your sideboard or something if you cast something that has the learn mechanic. In Commander, it's just going to be a sorcery spell. Why this is interesting, and I think Max kind of hit on it talking about Scour from Existence. Scour from Existence is a 7-mana instant that does the same thing. So you exile target permanent. And Scour is something that you can run in any deck, and primarily you see it show up in like a mono black deck as a way to deal with artifacts or enchantments, or sometimes red as a way to deal with enchantments, blue sometimes as well. So it tends to have a home in monocolor decks, and usually in a situation where somebody kind of knows what decks they're going to see frequently. They're like, I have to have some way to deal with my friend's doubling season or something. And if I don't, I'm going to lose. And I'm playing mono black, so there's just not a ton of options. So I'm running Scour from Existence as one of my ways to solve a problem that absolutely needs solving. But Scour is 7 mana. And for the most part, it's not the kind of thing you want to... It's one thing to hold up a white mana and say, if I see a crazy creature, I'm going to cast Swords to Plowshares and exile it. And if I don't, then who cares? You don't want to leave 7 mana up for Scour from Existence and not use it. So what I think is kind of relevant here is, yes, this is a sorcery speed, and it's not an instant, but Scour is going to force you to use it anyway, so you kind of, if you're leaving that mana free, you're kind of knowing what you're going to use it on. Yes, there's some slight advantages to being able to do it when a person thinks it's not going to happen as an instant, but more often than not, it's going to be the equivalent of the same thing. You know what you're going to blow up. You're always going to use the mana on Scour anyway. So in this case, you're saving 2 mana to also exile a thing on Introduction Annihilation. And I think if you are in a desperate situation, I would probably rather spend 5 than 7.
I agree with that 100%.
So that's a lot of me rambling about Introduction to Annihilation, but I agree. If you're someone who's running Scour, I would be very tempted to make that upgrade because saving 2 mana is kind of a big deal when you're spending that much. So that is a good pick, Max. Chris, what's your first one here?
So I think I did the show wrong. You guys said, any card in Strixhaven, and so the first one I picked was a card called Teferi's Protection.
I was going to say, did you just do 4 Mystical Archive cards?
Chris grabbed all Mystical Archives. Demonic Tutor's really interesting. You're not wrong. You would not be incorrect.
No, I did not.
It is interesting.
The first one that I have, though, is a white card. It is called Secret Rendezvous. It is a 3-mana sorcery that reads, you and target opponent each draw 3 cards. Now, the reason I find this card super interesting is this is mono white for 1 colorless and double white. You get to draw 3 cards. While yes, you're helping your opponent, which isn't, an optimal play, it seems like Wizards is kind of pushing themselves to make white a little bit better. And we've seen it over the past couple sets and other stuff. They're starting to introduce a little bit of white card draw. And if this is how white's going to be going forward, it's going to have the drawback like red has the drawback of you have to discard a card to draw a card type of deal, then it might be something that makes white more viable to play. You just have to build different and play different overall.
What do you think of this one, Max?
Secret Rendezvous is interesting. It looks... I don't know how I feel about giving my opponent 3 cards, especially if I'm playing this in mono white, because I think that's the only place I would play this. Not even in Boros, I would probably just play this in mono white. I don't know if I want to give that blue player 3 cards, or that Simic player 3 cards, or even, that mono green player 3 cards, because that's the best color in Magic, and they're probably going to stomp my face in next turn. But 3 cards for 3 mana in mono white is still probably good, as long as you can maybe use some politics to say, hey, I'll give you 3 cards, but leave me alone for a turn.
So I get what you're saying, and I think this card gets worse the more competitive your environment is.
Yes.
Because you have no good choices then. Like, if everyone's playing super tight, super fast decks all the time, you're going to very rarely find yourself in a position where you have a good player to give it to. However, one point I've heard a couple of people make that I disagree with is I've heard different shows reviewing cards talking about this, saying, well, you can already, if you want to, draw cards at the cost of giving people cards, you can do that in white already. You've got, Howling Mine effects or Temple Bell or whatever.
True.
I don't think that's a good comparison, because you can't control that. If one person is blowing everybody out and you're playing mono white, you don't want a Howling Mine giving that person more cards or a Temple Bell giving that person more cards. However, you may want to give someone who is also behind like you 3 cards to help knock that person who's currently in the lead out of that position, and they get no benefit from you and somebody else teaming up. And I also have found that I don't think those cards are that political, the Howling Mine kind of cards either. I know sometimes you hear people talk about them that way, but in my experience, they're annoying. Like, if I'm doing okay and someone's got a Howling Mine out, I might want to kill that person so they stop giving the other 2 people cards. With this, it's over. Someone's done it. They've given someone 3 cards, and you're like, okay, well, that's not great, but it's done. I don't have to try to target that person to knock them out because the damage has already happened. Versus the Howling Mine, where it's continuing to happen, and I want them gone before it can do additional damage. I think it's pretty playable in mono white. If you like, I am not going to probably run it in my Zero deck because it has card advantage baked into the commander already. I can go get planeswalkers when I blink it, and some of those planeswalkers like Karn kind of have card draw in them already. So like, I don't know if I need it, but there's a lot of mono white decks where I think it's very playable, and it's something that actually is political in that you can either give the cards to somebody who isn't a threat, or you can give them to somebody and make a deal. Hey, if I give you these cards, will you not attack me for 3 turns? And that's not something you can do with Howling Mind, really.
Yeah, the biggest thing I like about this card is that it just shows that Wizards is taking, the steps forward to try to make white a better color overall, so it's more playable.
Yeah, I agree. So my first of the 4 cards that I'm going to talk about here is one of the MDFC cards. On the first side is Myla, Crafty Companion, 3 mana, and it's a legendary creature Fox. Whenever an opponent attacks one or more of your planeswalkers you control, put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control, and whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. The flip side of this is Luca Wayward Bonder, who's 4 red, and he's got 5 loyalty on ETB. His +1, you may discard a card, and if you do, draw a card. And if a creature card was discarded this way, draw 2 cards instead. His -2 is return a target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it gains haste. And then you exile it at the beginning of the next end step, so it's kind of a sneak attack effect. And the -7 on Luca is you get an emblem with whenever a creature ETBs under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So why this is interesting is, number 1, it's probably going to be good in any 5-color Super Friends deck.
Going into my Alesha deck.
Yeah. Well, yeah. However, what's really quite good about it, right, like even in that Alesha deck, even if all you ever use it for is the Myla half, Chris, which you can recur with Alesha, it's protecting your stuff, or at least letting you draw stuff when someone tries to target your stuff.
Yep.
And obviously Super Friends, it's useful. However, it kind of creates its own new deck / archetype. There's been no reason in the past you would want to run Boros Super Friends. There's no commander that helped that out or that made it like a good thing to do, really. This is it. Like, if I didn't currently have a mono white Super Friends deck, I'd build a Boros one. This is a really, really solid commander if you are playing a ton of Planeswalkers, and it gives you a reason to do that in colors that have never had a reason to do it before.
That's true. I know that the flip side of the Walker, though, seems like it would be really good in like a Boros weenie deck or something, like a heavy creature deck, because if you discard a creature, you get to draw 2 cards.
Yeah, for sure. Like a situation where, maybe you never even intend to play the Myla side, you're just going to use the Luca as a card draw engine.
Yep.
But like there's stuff, Chandra, Acolyte of Flame is a red planeswalker that puts a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. That's one that would be pretty good in that deck. You have things like Planebound Accomplice from Modern Horizons, where you can basically sneak attack in a planeswalker. That's never a card that really had a home unless you were maybe in 5 colors. Same thing with Oath of Chandra, unless you were playing maybe a mono red Chandra planeswalker deck or 5 colors. It didn't really have a home. This would give it a home. And Luca Coppercoat Outcast, the very first Luca, he has a +1 that lets you exile the top 3 cards of your library, and creature cards you exile this way can be cast as long as you control a Luca Planeswalker. It doesn't say as long as you control Luca Coppercoat Outcast. It says as long as you control Luca Planeswalker. So if you use that other Luca in your deck, this one in your command zone will let you reuse those cards even if that other one is gone, because it just says Luca. It doesn't specify which one. So yeah, I like this one a lot. I think it's cool. I don't think it's going to be like a crazy powerful deck to build, but I like the idea that if you want to do something odd, this is a really strong commander for Boros Planeswalkers.
Your whole pitch there is like pulling me in hard because I have pretty much every red Planeswalker. So now I kind of want to build it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be kind of weird. I think this would be the kind of thing that would be fun to sit down with. People like, what are you playing? Like, Boros Planeswalkers.
I've always wanted to build Boros itself because it's such a horrible color combination. Try to make it good.
And here's your in.
Yes.
So Max, we'll throw it back to you. What's your number 2 card here?
My number 2 card is going to be Shadrix Silverquill. This is the legendary creature Elder Dragon for 3 and Orzhov for 2. It has 2 power and 5 toughness. It has flying and double strike. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may choose 2 modes. Each mode must target a different player. And the 3 modes are: target player creates a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying. Target player draws a card and loses a life. And target player puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature they control. I like that this has a little bit of the politics aspect in it, and I think we saw that a lot with the Silverquill precon that we'll be talking about probably next week. Mm-hmm. I love that you can be the player for one of these modes. It's not opponents. You aren't helping all your opponents. You're definitely helping yourself. And so if you need to draw a card and lose a life. If you want to make your entire board bigger, put +1/+1s on everybody, and you can say the person you're not attacking can draw the card, and then you go and wipe out someone else with your army of creatures that all just got bigger from this ability. And even so, like when it's down to maybe like 1-on-1, maybe giving your opponent that card is fine. Because you think you have the game won, or even if they only have one creature out and you have 3 or 4, let them put a +1/+1 counter on their only creature while you make another body or you draw a card, just to make sure you have something to go up against their next turn.
Yeah, and those 2/1s are relatively fragile if you're giving them to other players as well. It's pretty easy for you to run effects in your deck. There's like a multitude of effects in black that are either permanent, that give creatures like -1/-1, or just deal damage to everything for 1 or 2 that Shadrax is going to survive, that will clear out those 2/1s if you're giving them to other people. And a card I've talked about in the past that I'm a fan of in Orzhov colored decks is a Righteous War that gives black creatures pro black and white creatures, black creatures pro white, white creatures pro black. I mean, if you're running that in the Shadrax deck, give everybody you want those stupid 2/1 white and black Inkling creatures. They can't block your commander then.
Yeah.
And your commander can block them if it wants to. And it has double strike. So if you want to throw a sword on here or something, like you put a Blackblade Reforge on this, it's just going to one-shot somebody pretty often.
I do like that they brought more Elder Dragons into the game.
Yeah.
For story purposes, probably phenomenal base. I don't really pay attention to them, but I'd like to hear about them. The other thing, I looked this up, and you could build a deck all around Elder creatures in general.
Yeah.
There are 29 of them. You
get
within
the dragons and the dinosaurs. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's an Elder Demon too. I mean, that would just be sweet. Just be like, this is my old timer deck because these are all the elders. They're coming for you.
Get off my lawn.
Well, and one thing that's kind of nice about this too is that there's those commanders where you play them and then you're like, okay, let's see if it sticks around long enough for me to do a thing. This triggers at the beginning of combat. So you play this, and if you want to draw that card, you can draw that card as long as you put it in your first main phase. Or you need to make a 2/1 block or whatever you need to do. You can do that the turn you play it. You get the ability. That's really nice.
It might also turn into a card too where people are going to leave it alone because they know that you have to target someone else as well. Yeah. So they're like, well, I might be getting extra advantage on it. And obviously you're not going to target when a target player puts a counter on each creature they control, but they're like, well, I'm either going to get a card or a 2/1 creature, at my disposal. So something's going to happen.
And how many times have you sat at that game where you're at 4 and that one person's at 2 life or something? 1 life can make a difference in those situations. If you're like, okay, I'll let you draw a card and lose a life. Let's see if you can make it happen, because next turn I'm going to do it again.
Yeah,
and you're at 0.
Played against you like that, sitting at 3 or 4 life.
Absolutely.
I'd just be like, keep drawing cards, Dana. I'm going to get you. Have another one.
Go ahead and draw and hope I draw Sign of Blood, and I'm going to ding you for 2 as well. Yeah, I mean, it's not a reason to run it, but that's gonna that I guarantee that happens to somebody at some point in the not too distant future. Someone will be in that position where they can use Shadrax to kill somebody with their card draw. That does occur. So, all right, Chris, what is your number 2 here?
My number 2 actually fits right in the line of what we were just discussing about Shadrax killing someone off, and that is Crushing Disappointment. This is a 4-mana instant, 3 colorless and a black that reads: each player loses 2 life. And then you draw 2 cards. Now, while there are many other more efficient cards that draw you, in black and you lose 2 life or whatever, why not just dome everybody else as well to get the 2 cards? I mean, it's 4 mana, so it's 1 more than Read the Bones or something else like that, and you don't get the Scry, but I kind of like the idea of, in a 4-player game, you're doming 6 damage out aside from yourself, and you get to draw 2 cards. I don't see really a downfall to this card per se yet. And this is one of them that I was really eyeballing for my Mogus deck because I like doming everybody. So why not just do it and draw cards?
Well, and it's instant speed, which is really, really nice.
Yes.
And there's more than a few of those commanders out there, like Rakdos, Lord of Riots, for example, where you need to deal amount of damage to have some things happen on your turn. Rakdos, you need to deal it to cast him, but it also reduces the casting cost of spells. This lets you draw 2 cards while reducing the cost of whatever your Eldrazi or whatever you're going to cast by 6 damage.
Yep.
There's decks where this is not only a decent card, it's really, really good.
Yeah, I was curious about your input on this because you like to play these cards as well, so...
The instant speed is, I think, really nice, too. The one thing that I thought when I saw it is I don't necessarily have any black decks that need the mana sink or that, like, are caring about leaving mana up, and then if I don't use it, I'll use it for this.
Yeah.
But if I had them, like, I've seen those decks before that do a lot of things at instant speed and want to have a way to use mana if they don't use it for, something along the lines if they're playing a ton of other instant speed interaction. Like, okay, I didn't, like if you're playing some kind of Dimir deck.
Yep.
Hey, I didn't wind up using, my counter spell, so I'm going to spend the mana on this kind of draw effect. I don't have anything that really fits in that mold, but there are decks that absolutely do.
Now, what do you think about comparing this to the other 4 mana ones that, you lose 3, draw 3 or whatever?
So, yeah, it becomes does doing an additional 6 damage, is that worth losing 1 extra card and at instant speed? Yeah, in some cases I think so, like the Ambition's Cost or Ancient Craving kind of cards.
Yep.
They're the same cost. Yeah, it's 1 less card, but you're doing 6 damage on top of it. I think you probably want a little bit of extra synergy with that somehow. But your Mogus deck, where 2 damage each person can very easily be 4 or 6 or 8 sometimes. Great in those situations for sure.
Okay, I was curious about that because I don't know. No offense to you, Max, but you don't play black really, so...
Nope, no, I do not. You're fine. You can totally leave me out of this conversation.
Now, is it something you would play in your Ragnar Krav deck going forward, though?
Oh, totally. Especially if I have one half of the fun combo out.
Woo!
Yeah, there you go. All right, we'll go to my number 2 here. It is a blue instant, Resculpt. Resculpt is 1 and a blue, exile target artifact or creature, and its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. The granddaddy of these cards is things like Beast Within or Generous Gift that makes a 3/3, but they hit anything.
Yep.
Or you have the really good blue ones like Pondify and Rapid Hybridization and even Reality Shift that do it and give the person like a 3/3 lizard ape or a mutant.
And I think
turtle,
those only
crocodile.
hit creatures.
Those only hit creatures. Well, that's the thing. Those only hit creatures too. In this case, yes, you're making a slightly bigger token. This isn't a 3/3 beast, it's a 4/4 elemental, but it doesn't have flying or anything. So it's still just a vanilla creature, and it gives you a way to blow up artifacts in blue.
Until you give it to the Omnath player and they go, oh,
Right.
elementals.
Yeah, right. And that's definitely, but outside of those narrow corner cases, if you're playing mono blue or even you're playing Dimir where you can't interact with artifacts for the most part, this is a destroy artifact. It's not even a destroy, technically. It's an exile. So it gets rid of the thing for good. It deals with indestructibility, and there's enough Darksteel kind of stuff out there. This will deal with that Blightsteel Colossus swinging at you. It's just going to be gone, and they get an elemental that you can block. I think this is really good. I don't think here's the problem. I have mono blue deck running all 3 of the cards I named. They're running Pondify, Hybridization, Reality Shift. I don't think this is better than any of them, but I think it's just as good. I think it makes me want to run all 4, not replace one of the 3.
Oh, I would agree with that 100%.
How about you, Max? You have your side deck.
I
Is
do.
this going to find a home in there?
That's difficult because I don't run any of the other ones in Psy.
Okay.
Just because I'm really focused on the artifacts doing their thing or the clones doing their thing. But it might see play in Brago or even Tuvasa, because every now and then getting something out of the way in Tuvasa is necessary.
And there's going to definitely be occasions where that 4/4 elemental is a problem, but 95% of the time, do you guys ever even care about the 3/3 beast token?
No.
No, a lot of times it gets wiped anyways. You're pretty much you're looking at, destroying something now and, anything type of deal. And, this almost fits all the, the check boxes for blue.
A lot of the times with those tokens from Beast Within or Generous Gift, I see people use them as fodder for stuff like Village Rites because they didn't want to sack, that 5/5 flyer, but they will definitely sack a 3/3 token to draw a couple cards.
Well, and this isn't, this is kind of a weird game thing that you don't want to count on, but how many times have you seen somebody go, oh, I forgot I had that beast token you gave me 3 turns ago?
All the time.
That literally just crossed my mind, too.
Yeah, that really, people forget about those things because it's not their thing, they just grab a dice really quick and put it down. Versus a flying token that can actually get around things and hit planeswalkers or something. Yeah, it's pretty insignificant to give blue the ability to hit artifacts. And they've also said this is the last time they're going to do that. This was not what they were planning to do, and they don't want to give blue artifact interaction. So it's one of those weird cards. It's always going to kind of be there, but I think it's really, really solid.
I think it's perfect.
All right, Max, we're going to go back to you. What do you got here?
My next one is Strixhaven Stadium. This is a 3-mana artifact with a ton of text on it. It says, tap, add colorless to your mana pool, and put a point counter on the stadium. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, remove a point counter from the stadium. And then whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, put a point counter on the stadium. Then if it has 10 or more point counters, remove them all, and that player loses the game. I love these alternate win the game / someone loses the game cards. We've seen a lot of them since, probably Throne of Eldraine is when we saw them, when they started to really come at us. I think we got Happy Endings, that was one of them. I like this because it's a 3-mana rock, worst case. You're adding a colorless to your mana pool.
Right.
So this will definitely go into like my side deck because I do have issues closing that game out, but knowing if I can amass an army of Thopters and hit, an opponent for 10 damage, there's 10 counters on this thing and they lose the game. And to be honest, it might show up in a couple of my other decks where combat damage maybe isn't how I win, but this will definitely help me do combat by making someone lose in an alternate way.
And like you said, it's always a mana rock. Like worst case scenario, it's just a mana rock.
Right.
That's true. The thing I like most about this one compared to any of the other ones is that your opponents actually have control over keeping this, in control. Yeah, that's another good word. Control in general. Because they can, deal damage to remove the point counters from it. So, or they can do stuff like Vampire Hexmage, remove all counters from it, that kind of stuff to keep it from doing anything stupid. This card also becomes really stupid in a proliferate deck, though, because you can just tick it all the way up really fast and then dome someone out of the game, too.
And one thing that jumped out at me really quickly, too, is a lot of times token decks are the ones that have the ability to protect you from taking combat damage.
Yep.
Because you go so wide, so you're going to, hit somebody in the face with Strixhaven Stadium and put 4 point counters on it and then make 3 tokens. And now you've got 3 blockers sitting there to keep you from taking counters off it. And so next turn, assuming you don't lose them all, you're going to swing in with 7 of those to put 7 more counters on this. So it gets even better if you happen to be playing like a white token deck or something where you have access to like Intangible Virtue or whatever, where you can give all your tokens vigilance and hit somebody and keep a ton of blockers back. It's going to make it even more difficult for someone to get through and knock the counters off this. Yeah. Unless they have a removal spell in hand.
My only question, and I think it's going to come down to like triggers, is what if I swing at 2 different people and those put the 10th counter on it? Who do I decide loses the game?
And I think that's going to be your choice, I guess.
Because damage happens simultaneously, then these triggers would go on the stack.
Maybe you take out both people.
I guess we'll wait for the comprehensive rules probably next week.
Sure. I would bet if you hit 2 people and put 10 counters on it, that action can only apply to 1 person.
Yeah.
Would be my guess. But hey, then you're in a little bit of a political situation. Okay. What are you going to do for me if I don't kill you with the Strixhaven Stadium? I'll kill you instead.
I'm really I'm really thirsty and there's a soda machine up there.
I volunteer as tribute.
Coke and I won't kill you. So what's your next one here, Chris?
My next one is a removal spell, kind of similar to the one that you were discussing, Dana, in the blue one. This one is black and white called Fracture. So for 1 white and 1 black, you get an instant speed that reads Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. I was looking at this, comparing it to like D-Spark and a couple of the other ones out there. And honestly, I think this could be a staple-ish card going forward, especially in these colors due to the fact that it has Planeswalker stapled onto it. For 2 mana to destroy any Planeswalker seems phenomenal in the game. While both white and black have, good removal spells built in, why not add this to the suite to remove some of those other less efficient ones? Like we talked about Return to Dust. Not a lot of people are playing that now because they're playing Crush Contraband because you get to exile stuff. So this is even more mana efficient, but, you get to do all the other things that you want to do with it.
Yeah, 2 mana is what makes it so tempting.
Yes.
At that point, you're like, okay, do I want to swap out Utter End for this or something? Yeah, Utter End is exile, and it hits more things, but it's 4 mana versus 2 for this, which is so much easier to leave up just in case something comes down, and then you don't feel like you need to spend it. Like when you leave 4 mana up, you feel like you kind of want to use it on something.
Yes.
You don't feel too bad about not spending 2 mana. You're like, okay, I'll just not cast something and let's see what happens next turn.
Yeah, I had to reread this quick because I was like, I thought it said creature on it too, and I'm like, did they just break a card and put like everything for 2 mana? I was like, oh boy.
And I feel like this is going to be really useful in Standard if you're playing black-white.
Yes. I mean, even, like, I was thinking, black-white decks in general in Commander, I mean, like, if you're running the Hero's Downfall or something like that, sure, it destroys a creature or a Planeswalker. Why not play this? Because usually artifacts and enchantments are more, prevalent and more annoying on the field than a creature is, because creatures can get board wiped, all that other fun stuff. So that's why I see this card as more playable than some of the other ones.
Well, and like Mortify sees a lot of play. Mortify is destroy target creature or enchantment. So I guess in this case, you don't get to kill the creature. It's just artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. But like it's 1 mana less to hit 3 things versus 1 mana more to hit 2 things.
Yes.
I feel like if you're running Mortify, and of course, if you're in black-white, you already have access to Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile anyway. So you have answers to deal with creatures. Almost everything else hits creatures as well. And if you still have Mortify in a deck, I'd be pretty tempted to switch that to Fracture.
Oh, I agree with that too. I mean, because this might even replace Generous Gift maybe in a black-white deck. I don't know. I guess that's all on someone's, how they want to play it. What
their personal preference is, and if they, yeah, that could be. I like Generous Gift because it hits more targets, but this still hits 3 things. It's not like you're switching from, hitting 6 things to hitting 1. It still hits 3. That's still pretty good.
Yes.
Okay, my third one here, also a removal spell.
We're on a theme here.
I feel like that's all this set was for the most part.
There was a lot of them. Yeah, there was a lot of them. Baleful Mastery. It's 3 and a black. Exile target creature or planeswalker. So we've seen this effect in black at the 4 mana range before. Vraska's Contempt, for example. And we just got the one, and I've just forgot the name of it, in Kaldheim.
The non-Vraska's Contempt one from Kaldheim.
Yes.
The one that doesn't gain you life.
Exactly. So, that in and itself isn't that exciting. However, there's a caveat on this card that says you may pay 1 and a black rather than paying the spell's mana cost. And if 1 and a black cost was paid, an opponent draws a card. That isn't the opponent that you're hitting their thing. It's just an opponent. So, Vraska's Contempt was fairly playable, particularly in like a mono black deck at 4 mana. This is the same cost. It is an exile effect. It does also hit planeswalkers, which is really nice. And there's going to be plenty of times where, like, the thing you're exiling belongs to the person you're just going to kill next turn anyway. So who cares if they get a card? Or you can use it politically. It's not like that Howling Mind thing we talked about where everyone benefits and you don't know what that's going to mean. In this case, you say, hey, Sarah, I'll let you draw a card off this if you don't swing next turn. Like there's some baked in utility from that as well, either as a, use it politically or just, or give it to the person who's so far behind it doesn't matter. Like there's that game that happens frequently enough where that one person's like just land screwed. It's turn 9 and they have 3 lands because they've had bad luck, and maybe they're gonna appreciate you giving them a card, and maybe it's not gonna matter because they're so far behind. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
And again, worst case, you just cast it for 4 mana and exile a creature or planeswalker, and that's already something that Vraska's Contempt was doing.
Yeah, I do like this card a lot. I actually like the whole system. They have quite a few cards that actually do this, and I like the idea of you have like double options on. It's like, okay, do I want to do this or do I want to do it for cheaper but give advantage to opponents, pending on circumstances of games. I mean, it opens up a whole new game plan in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. All right, we're on the last round here.
Woohoo.
Max, what's your last one?
My last card is the card out of Strixhaven I like the most, and I actually mentioned it on last week's show, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago, but I'm going to talk about Semester's End. This is an instant for 3 and a white, and it says exile any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of the next end step, return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them enters with the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, and an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker. I'm a big fan of the cards like Ghostway and Eerie Interlude and stuff like that in my Brago deck, and even in some of my other decks just to help be kind of board wipe prevention. The fact that this is the first one, to my knowledge, that hits planeswalkers is huge. And the fact that they're going to come back with an additional loyalty. So yeah, they're going to come back and I might not be able to use them right away, but they're coming in with 6 loyalty instead of 5 or 3 instead of 2. That's huge. And for it being 1 mana more than those spells typically are, Ghostway and Eerie Interlude are both 2 or 3 mana, and this is for 1 more. I have no issue holding up 4 mana in most of my decks just to help prevent me losing an entire board of value.
I really like this card as well. It's a phenomenal card. The thing I see where this card shines really well too is all the new Planeswalkers we got from War of the Spark and where they're all negative abilities. So if you blink them out and they come back in, well, they come back in with an additional one. Plus now you can start negging them again.
Well, and even if they don't necessarily have... Even if they have ways to +1 them, there are plenty of times you drop that Planeswalker and you -3 it or something and knock the loyalty down to 1 or 2 to use that removal ability or whatever it is on their minus. And then everyone's like, oh, well, okay, that isn't going to be a threat for 4 turns or something. And before the end of your turn, semesters end, and I'm going to blink 3 Planeswalkers, and all of which I've rolled down on abilities.
And now they're all going to go up.
Right. Not only are they reset to the base, they've just gotten +1 on top of that for your next turn. And if you happen to have like a Oath of Gideon or something in play that like makes them come into play with even more counters on them,
it's going to be good.
There's a lot of trickery you can do with this. It's going to be a really good card in Chris's new Boros Super Friends deck.
I know.
Or Dana's Jeru deck.
Yeah, I'm going to put it in Jeru for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, the more and more I looked at this set, the more that I realized that there's actually quite a few cards I want to get out of it now.
Yeah, we'll kind of touch on that overall at the end. All right, Chris, what is your last card?
This is the best card in Strixhaven. My favorite card, and it's even in the best color of Magic. And this card is called Dragon's Approach. For 2 colorless and a red, you get a wonderful sorcery that reads, Dragon's Approach deals 3 damage to each opponent. And then it reads, you may exile Dragon's Approach and 4 cards named Dragon's Approach from your graveyard. Wait, how can you have 5 of these? I don't understand this at all. And then it says, if you exile these 4 or 5 cards, you get to search your library for a dragon creature card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Well, what are you doing? You still haven't explained this. I don't understand how we can have 5 of these. And now it reads, a deck can have any number of cards named Dragon's Approach. This card just jumped out at me because I love the aspect of, building I just want to put 30 of, 1 card in a deck and do something. And this gives you that option. This also fits mono red perfectly with the, 3 damage to everybody, all that fun jazz or whatever. And then let's play some big dragons and beat face. And personally for me, I am going to build a deck around this because I have a Petitioner's deck and now I want to build this one just because I want to cheat in dragons for free.
Do you already have your copy of Thrumming Stone to use now that it's spiked up to $60 again because of this?
I think I have a Thrumming. I don't know. I'm slowly actually adding my whole collection to a collection tracker, so we'll find out if I have one.
Nice. Yeah, this is the first time they've done this kind of thing on a non-creature.
Yes.
And 3's not unreasonable just to cast it to blow stuff up and then get it in your graveyard anyway.
And it's 3 damage to each opponent. So you got to think.
Right, yeah.
And in red, you have the damage doublers. So it could be 6 damage to each opponent. And if you exile them out, you bring in a dragon. Say you exile 5, you bring in Stormbreath Dragon or something, for instance. It's a 4/4 flyer with haste. Then you attack for 4. That's another 8 damage with a damage doubler. It just seems good. I was actually looking at a few other cards in this set that allow you to do other weird shenanigans with this. Along with the big thing about this in red is, guess what all your card draw spells do? They let you discard cards. So you can actually fill your graveyard with these to exile them faster.
Yeah, it has really good synergy with things like Madness or any of the looting stuff the red does for sure.
So,
yeah.
Chris, I'm going to give you 2 months, and I expect to see a Mogus Dragon's Approach deck.
Mogus, huh?
Well, you're already dealing damage with Mogus. Might as well make this part of it.
See, there is a card out of Strixhaven that I thought about building this around. It's a red-white cleric that says that all your instant sorceries have lifelink.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought about building it around that.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, well, and it's also this is going to be not a super cheap card, but it's a common.
Yes.
In this set filled with things like the Mystic Archive we talked about, and it's a common. This is, it's not going to be nothing, but it's also going to be not crazy expensive to put one together like it would be if it was an uncommon or a rare too. So.
Yeah. The other thing that I saw with this card, and this could be just speculation on my part going forward, the first 3 of this type of card were all mono black. You had Shadowborn Apostle, Relentless Rats, and the other rat one. Then in one of the recent sets, they brought out a blue card, which was the Petitioners or whatever it was. And now they came out with a red one. So my theory going forward is we're going to eventually get one in each color. And I hope that they're each all playable, because then it just creates, a sweet new deck archetype you can build.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Get one in black, get one in white. Yeah. Or excuse me, green and white for sure.
Yep.
I'm on board. Okay. My last one here is, it's a removal spell again.
Surprise, surprise.
Culling Ritual, 2 black and a green. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. However, you then add a black or a green mana to your mana pool for each permanent destroyed this way. So you destroy every Soul Ring and every one of those 2 CMC mana rocks before playing. You probably don't have a ton of those because you're in green, so most of your ramp tends to be in the form of land ramp. And then you add 6 mana to your mana pool, so you're now you've destroyed everyone else's mana rocks, and you are now ahead in mana before you even cast this. Like, you've pushed yourself to 6 after spending 4 and knocking everyone else's rocks out.
I just see this as a combo piece in token decks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or a card that's going to be fit into like CEDH removal suites.
That would not surprise me either. Yeah, like, you don't need to hit many targets with this. If you destroy 1 Soul Ring and 1 Talisman, you've done that for 2 mana functionally, because you get 2 back.
Yep.
And you've knocked 2 opponents off of 2 mana rocks. Like, how, I can't think of the last time on turn 4 when you would probably cast this. I've looked around and not at least seen 2 targets that you're going to hit. And to do so for 2 mana, worst case scenario, again, you might, there's going to be a ton of games where you wind up with 14 mana or something.
Yeah, I mean, the amount I've been seeing treasure tokens coming out lately and clue tokens. I mean, anything token related, this thing's going to just annihilate them.
I mean, at least treasures, they could sacrifice them in response. But even then, who cares? Okay, so you've forced them to sacrifice all of their treasure tokens so you don't get the mana. That's still a win. I'll still take forcing someone to sacrifice 4 treasures and get nothing for it, even if I don't get mana back for it too.
Agreed.
So, yeah, I mean, would it be great if it was instant speed? Yes, but like, as a source-free speed spell, that's going to, worst case, probably generate pretty good value, and best case, give you 12 mana or something stupid. Card is really, really good.
I read this too, and I was like, CMC 2 or less, how much is that really going to hit? And the more and more that you're talking about it, and the more and more I think about it, I'm like, that'll actually hit a lot in, casual games. And then if you go into more competitive aspects, this will hit even more. And then go into the combo aspect, and then you're just breaking it, and it's like, oh, geez.
Well, and I'm just like, for examples, I've just been talking about mana rocks, but like, that's every mana dork. Like, that's every Birds of Paradise or Deathrite Shaman or Llanowar Elves that you see in the game.
Yep.
That's every, in a non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, that's most tokens.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff this is going to crush. And, you're playing against that person who's got, a dozen tokens in play, and you're going to just sweep those tokens away and make yourself a nuts amount of mana in addition to knocking their whole army out.
Oh, it's gonna be so good.
I can't wait for the play for like cast this hold priority, and in response cast a heroic intervention to save all of my all my stuff, destroy 8 or 9 things of my opponents, and then drop like a Crater Hoof and kill the board.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, this isn't for each permanent destroyed this way that your opponents control. This hits your own stuff too. Mm-hmm. So like, if you're in that point where, the beast token we talked about that wasn't that good. Like, okay, well, I'll trade that beast token for 1 mana this turn that I can use to, make whatever huge play I want to make.
Yeah, I mean, it might also be worth it too. Later in the game, you get the Soul Ring out there, and it's like, well, this thing's worthless now. Well, now you can tap it, and all you have to do is tap black and green. You kill it, and you get, net mana back. So
yeah, I like this card a lot. Okay, that is the Strixhaven Tremendous 12. Those are the cards that we all thought were super interesting and worth going into a little more detail in Strixhaven. But we'd like to hear from you and hear what cards really jumped out at you as being interesting or a lot of fun. So feel free to reach out to us on the Twitter birds and let us know what you liked. And I am sure we'll be discussing this for many weeks to come in our Slack, because there are so many new cards out right now.
Oh, that's an understatement. It just keeps going.
It does. This is Magic never lets up these days, it seems like.
Weren't we going to talk about something else before we signed off?
Yes.
Sorry, I felt like we were segueing into the end.
No, thanks for reminding me. So we've looked at this whole set. Now, Max, you said this really didn't kind of jive for you, didn't all come together. You've not loved Strixhaven. What is it about it that didn't work for you?
I think it's quite a few things, and it's not. And the cards themselves, I think, are the last on the bottom of that list. I think it's the amount of Magic product, again, is just overwhelming. You know, we just did Time Spiral Remastered, which we all kind of ignored on the show at least. And then the Strixhaven into Commander 21. I don't think Wizards has really figured out a good way to do those previews concurrently. You know, they started this last year with Ikoria, and I think looking back, I think the Ikoria ones were a little more clear cut of these cards are the Commander decks and these ones are the set proper. And I think this year showing us those face cards along with the set proper kind of made my mind shuffle them all together. And on top of that, you know, so that alone, I think that's not giving both sets kind of time to breathe. I think in a perfect world, if they could do it my way, I would say announce that, you know, Strixhaven is coming out, Commander 21 is being tied into Strixhaven, do Strixhaven set proper previews for the 2 weeks, let the set come out, and maybe the Wednesday of the week the set comes out, or even the week after, while it's still fresh in everybody's minds, start these Commander 21 previews like they're doing this year. 5 different content creators all previewed one of the decks, and then have that lead up to, you know, the week before they come out. So maybe the Commander decks come out 2 weeks after the set proper. Everything's still hot and fresh in everybody's minds, but it gives each product enough time to breathe to where it's like, hey, I need singles or packs from Strixhaven proper. I have enough time to go do that, and I have maybe another week to stash some money away to go pick up all 5 Commander decks. It also allows us as content creators time to really analyze one versus the other, versus kind of feeling rushed. I always feel rushed with these type of set releases where they're together and they tie into each other. But all in all, like, the Wizard School thing sounded really cool when it first got announced, and I don't know, maybe it just isn't for me. Like Lorehold, I'll use that as an example, as the Boros colors, even though that's not Boros.
Right.
To me, you know, they're really focusing on artifact synergies within that color combination, and as someone who's been playing EDH for a long time, I think we all realize that in order to make red-white succeed in Commander, you need artifacts. You need mana rocks, ways to recycle those, and I feel like this is WotC jumping onto the bandwagon at the last minute, being like, oh, we figured it out. And that's just my personal opinion. I feel like they are celebrating something that every single EDH player has figured out 2 or 3 years ago. And they're finally putting it into a product that we can give them money for. But that's just the consumer in me and the player in me. I think I just need to really sit down and really look at the set more, but I just think it's product overload, and the set itself, the story just doesn't hit me like Kaldheim did, or even I wasn't hot on Throne of Eldraine, but at least it was cool. The fairy tale aspect, I liked that more than the Wizard School. But that's just who I am.
Sure. Okay. How about you, Chris? What's your full thoughts on this here?
Overall, after looking at the set, I like the set as it is. Like, I don't know story base or anything for the set. Just looking at it as a set itself, I like it. I like the introduction, you know, of more MDFC cards. I like the ability to do things, you know, different things off of one card type of deal. And there's so many cards in the set that I want to get, but I don't know if it's worth it for me anyways, to actually buy like booster box or packs or to hunt down singles. And then it comes down to the point, I'm like Max, you know, product overload is becoming a serious thing, you know. Because now we got, what's after this? We got the Commander sets we're going to look at. And then after that, we got Modern Horizons 2, I think, is coming. And then right after that's going to be the D&D set. So, I mean, it becomes really hard to stay focused on what, you know, each cards are and then keep them fresh in your mind and actually just go and hunt them down in general.
Yeah, the constant barrage of product is definitely a lot to deal with, so I get where Max is coming from there. One thing I liked about Strixhaven, a lot of the cards are really versatile, I guess, in terms of like the removal spells and those kind of things. However, there's not a lot of like super busted feeling stuff. I don't think there's none of those cards that feel like, oh, this goes in every single deck that can run it. There's stuff that's very good in specific decks. And I much prefer seeing that than I do seeing like the Dockside Extortionist, where like if you're playing red, it's just going to be a great card period. Doesn't matter.
Yes.
So I like the things that are a little more narrow, where in someone's certain deck, that's where it really shines. And I do think Strixhaven has done a very nice job of that, where there's a bunch of these cards that are going to have really good roles.
Yes. The one thing I'll elaborate on that or add to that is that I noticed a lot of these cards in this set in particular can be EDH playable, whereas a lot of other sets in the past that we've looked at, it's like it was hard to scrounge up good EDH playable cards, and now it seems like a lot of them in the set I can just jam in almost any deck.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Chris. From what I have prepping for this show and just what I've seen in our community, I do agree. I think the cards in Strixhaven are much more, they can go anywhere, versus maybe something from Call Time was more niche and you needed a certain type of deck to run a card.
Yeah, it's not so standard oriented or anything as what it was in, years past.
Okay, I think that is going to wrap up our Tremendous 12 from Strixhaven. I would love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to reach out and let us know what cards are really standing out and shining for you and what you think of the set as a whole. You can find me on the Twitterbirds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. He is out there in the interwebs at Ursa Bearwalker, and our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We will be back next week with the review of Commander 2021. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.